The hunter in the night sky above Earth was not its own anymore. A vast shadow moved across the stars, blocking the moonlight like a living eclipse. It was the warship Zereth, a vessel older than most of the worlds it had destroyed. Its jagged hull was covered in scars from battles across galaxies, and at its heart stood Vorak, warlord of the Zrathian Empire, a creature feared on every world that knew his name. Vorak had no mercy in his blood. His kind believed that mercy was a disease. They conquered planets not just for resources, but to erase any chance of future resistance on dozens of worlds. He had hunted the last survivors himself. It was not duty. It was pleasure. And now, Earth was his newest hunt, below. The ruins of a great city burned in the night. Black smoke twisted into the sky, hiding the stars. The streets were littered with the twisted remains of human vehicles and the silence of lives. Already gone, but Vorak's sensors told him some still remained. Small, fragile life signs scattered in the rubble, weak prey, waiting to be found. His armored boots sank into the cracked concrete as he stepped from the landing craft. He was tall, his body built like living stone. His skin was dark and ridged, almost metallic. Two burning amber eyes scanned the darkness in his clawed hands. He carried a spear-like weapon that could fire bolts of energy or slice steel with its blade. Vorak moved slowly through the wreckage. He preferred the hunt to be silent, no rushing, no noise, only the sound of the prey's breath when they realized they had been found. The shadows seemed to fold around him as he passed. Every now and then, he heard the faint scurry of rats or the far-off groan of a collapsing building. Then, he heard something else. A sound he had never heard in the middle of a hunt. Not footsteps, not a scream. It was singing. He stopped. The melody was soft, almost fragile, carried on the warm night air. It wasn't the sound of fear. It was calm, steady, as if the one who sang did not care about death at all. Intrigued, Vorak followed the sound. It led him deeper into the ruins, past a street where firelight flickered against shattered glass. The voice grew clearer, female, human. He turned a corner and saw her. She stood in the broken doorway of a collapsed building. Her clothes were dusty, torn from survival. But her posture was straight. She was young, her dark hair falling loosely around her face, and her eyes, they met his without a flicker of fear. Vorak was used to humans trembling, running, begging. This one did none of those things. She simply stopped singing, tilted her head, and said, "You're not here to help, are you?" Her voice was steady, almost casual. He didn't answer. He never answered prey. But something in the way she spoke made him hesitate. "You're the one killing everyone," she continued. Her words were not an accusation filled with panic. They were a fact, spoken with quiet certainty. "Why?" she asked. No human had ever asked him that before, usually. There was no time for questions before they died. Vorak took a step closer, his shadow falling over her. His weapon hummed faintly. She didn't move back. She just looked at him, her gaze steady. The longer he stared, the stranger it felt. Something deep inside him, a place he had locked away long ago, stirred. "You could kill me," she said softly. "You probably will. But maybe first, you should know who you're killing." The words slid into his mind like a blade. He didn't care for names, for stories, for anything beyond the hunt. And yet, he found himself asking, "What is your name?" "Arya," she said simply. Then she turned and walked back into the ruins, not quickly, not like prey fleeing a predator. Just walking. Vorak watched her vanish into the darkness. For the first time in years, he didn't follow. For the first time ever, he let his prey go. As he stood there, the fires crackled in the distance. The hunt could wait, but the question she had left him with could not. and without knowing why, Vorik decided he would see Arya again. High above, the warship Zereth waited, but on the ground, something in the hunter's heart had shifted, and it was only the beginning. Astris, the woman who stood still next night. The city lay under a blanket of ash. The fires had burned themselves out, leaving behind blackened ruins and a dead silence. Vorik walked those streets again, his heavy steps echoing faintly against broken walls. The hunt had resumed, but his mind was not fully on the prey. It kept circling back to the human woman, Arya, the one who had not run, the one who had looked him in the eye as if he were no more frightening than a passing stranger. Vorik was not used to distraction. He had led countless hunts, each one efficient and merciless. But now, he found himself scanning the streets not for the nearest hiding survivor, but for her. Her voice still lingered in his memory, the way it had cut through the smoke and ruin. The melody had been soft, but it carried something powerful, something he could not name. A faint sound reached his ears, the clang of metal against stone. He followed it through an alley where the walls leaned dangerously inward. At the far end, in the shadow of a fallen tower, she was there. Arya knelt beside a pile of rubble, lifting pieces of broken concrete with her bare hands. Beside her lay an injured man, his leg twisted painfully. She was trying to free him. Vorik stepped into the open. His towering form blocked the moonlight, casting a shadow over both of them. The injured man froze in terror. Arya, however, simply glanced up. "You again," she said, her tone neither warm nor afraid. "Help me move this, or go away." The words struck him like no weapon could. No human had ever spoken to him like that. His kind were gods of war, destroyers of worlds. To speak without fear was unthinkable, and yet she spoke to him as though he were just another pair of hands. He moved closer, his massive claws gripping the largest slab of rubble. With a single motion, he lifted it and tossed it aside. The injured man gasped, scrambling backward. Arya didn't thank him. She didn't even pause. Instead, she focused on wrapping the man's leg with a torn piece of fabric. Vorik watched, curious. Why would she waste her time on someone who couldn't fight, couldn't run, in his world? Weakness was left behind. "You could leave him," Vorik said finally, his voice deep and rough. Arya tied the knot firmly. "I could," she said without looking at him. "But then I'd be no better than you." Her words landed heavy. Vorik didn't know why he didn't strike her for the insult. Perhaps because it didn't feel like an insult. It felt like a truth she was daring him to face. She stood, brushing dust from her clothes. The injured man leaned on her shoulder as they began to walk away. Vorik didn't stop them. Arya glanced back only once, her eyes locking with his for a brief second. There was no challenge in them this time, only something far more dangerous. Recognition. As they disappeared into the shadows, Vorik felt something unfamiliar in his chest. It wasn't anger or hunger for the hunt. It was a question, one that grew louder with every step he took. Why did he let them live? And why did he want to see her again? Back aboard the warship Zereth, the commander awaited his report. Vorik simply said, "The hunt continues," but he didn't mention Arya. He didn't explain why two humans still breathed when they should have been ash. That night, as the ship hovered over the ruined city, Vorik stood at the edge of the landing bay, staring down at the dark streets. Somewhere out there, she was moving through the ruins. Somewhere out there, a human woman had dared to speak to him like an equal, and, without realizing it, he was no longer hunting her. He was following her. The unwanted encounter days passed. The ruined city lay under a haze of smoke and dust. Vorik moved through the streets like a shadow, his spear weapon in hand, hunting pockets of human resistance. Each hunt was supposed to be quick and final. But lately, he found himself distracted. It wasn't weakness. He refused to call it that. yet his focus drifted, always back to her. The woman called Arya. He told himself he was only curious. A predator studying unusual prey. But deep inside, something didn't fit that excuse anymore. That night, the air was cold. The streets were quiet except for the distant crackle of a fire. Vorik followed the faint heat signature of human life through a shuttered marketplace. His sensors showed 5 individuals clustered in a half-collapsed building. Easy kill. He stepped inside, his armored boots crushing broken glass underfoot. Then he saw her. Arya was there, crouched beside a young boy, wrapping a strip of cloth around his bleeding arm. An older woman sat against the wall, coughing weakly. 2 other survivors huddled in the shadows. When Arya saw him, she didn't scream. She didn't even pause her work. "You again," she said, her voice calm. "I told you before, if you're here to kill, just get it over with." Her words weren't defiant. They were. Tired, Vorik stepped closer, his shadow falling over her and the boy. He expected her to shield the child or beg for mercy. Instead, she tightened the bandage and gently told the boy, "You'll be all right." The boy looked up at Vorik with wide, terrified eyes. Vorik's weapon hummed faintly, but he didn't fire. Something in that small, fragile face made him hesitate. It reminded him of something buried so deep in his memory he couldn't place it. Arya stood slowly, her gaze steady on his. "You've destroyed half the city," she said quietly. "Do you even know why? Or do you just follow orders?" Vorik's grip on his weapon tightened. He didn't answer. Not because he refused, but because her question struck too close to something he'd never examined before. "You call us weak," she continued, "but I've seen your kind only take and destroy. If that's strength, I don't want it." The silence between them felt heavier than the smoke-filled air. Vorik turned away, his instinct screaming to end this before it became dangerous. Before. Her words dug deeper. But as he reached the door, a sharp sound split the air. From above, a squad of his own soldiers descended on anti-grav skiffs. They spotted the humans instantly. Weapons charging, one of them moved to fire. Vorik's arm shot up, blocking the shot. The soldier froze. Unsure, Vorik growled. A deep rumble that carried enough authority to make them lower their weapons. "These are mine," Vorik said, his voice cold. The soldiers glanced at each other, but obeyed, flying off into the night. When he turned back, Arya was staring at him, not with gratitude, but with something else. Confusion, maybe even suspicion. "Why?" she asked. Vorik didn't answer. Instead, he stepped back into the shadows and vanished into the ruined streets. That night, he didn't return to the Zereth immediately. Instead, he stood alone on the roof of a crumbling skyscraper, watching the fires burn below. Arya's voice echoed in his head. Her questions dug at him in ways no blade ever had. And for the first time in his life, Vorik wondered if the enemy he was fighting was not just humanity, but something inside himself. Asterisk, the cracks in the monster's armored city had been silent for hours. No gunfire, no distant screams, only the low hum of the alien warship Zereth drifting above like a silent moon. Vorik walked alone through the wreckage, his heavy steps echoing in the hollow streets. The hunts were easy now. Too easy. Most humans were either dead or scattered into hiding. But instead of satisfaction, he felt nothing. Since his last encounter with Arya, his thoughts had been restless. The way she looked at him, not with fear, but with the sharp edge of truth, lingered like an old wound. Her question kept repeating in his mind. "Do you even know why? Or do you just follow orders?" For the first time in his long life, Vorik found himself without an immediate answer. A loud crash broke the quiet. It came from a street 2 blocks over. Vorik moved toward it without hesitation. The scent of dust and heat grew stronger as he turned the corner. One of the old high-rise buildings had finally given into the damage. Its upper floors were collapsing, sending clouds of debris into the night. Through the dust, he saw movement. A group of survivors sprinted from the falling building, and among them, Arya. She was holding the hand of a young girl, pulling her forward through the chaos. Chunks of concrete crashed around them, and the air was thick with choking dust. Vorik's instinct screamed for him to turn away. This was not his concern, yet his body moved before his mind decided. He leapt forward, his massive frame cutting through the haze when a slab of debris fell toward them. He slammed his armored shoulder into it, shattering it before it could crush them. Arya stopped, staring at him through the dust. She was breathing hard, her hair matted with sweat and dirt, but she didn't thank him. She just said, "Move," and kept pulling the girl towards safety. Vorik followed without thinking. A second collapse roared behind them, the shockwave almost knocking the humans off their feet. He reached down, scooping up the young girl with one arm. Her terrified eyes met his, and instead of screaming, she buried her face in his chest. The strange weight in his chest tightened. They made it to a half-collapsed overpass, taking shelter under its cracked beams. Arya gently took the girl from him, checking her for injuries. Vorik stood nearby, his spear lowered. "You saved her," Arya said finally, looking at him. Her tone was not warm, but it was no longer sharp. "You didn't have to." Vorik didn't answer right away. He wasn't sure himself why he had done it. It was instinct, he said at last, his deep voice uncertain. Arya raised an eyebrow. "Instinct," she repeated, "for someone who claims to have no mercy. That's an interesting instinct." Before he could respond, the distant whine of anti-grav skiffs filled the air. Vorik's head snapped upward. His soldiers were approaching. If they saw him with humans, questions would follow. Dangerous questions. He turned to Arya. "Go," he said firmly. She didn't argue. Gathering the survivors, she disappeared into the shadows. Vorik waited until they were gone before stepping out into the open. Meeting his soldiers head-on, they landed, weapons ready. "Report, Commander," one of them demanded. Vorik's voice was cold again. "No prey here. Move on." They hesitated, but obeyed, rising back into the night. When the last hum of their engines faded, Vorik stood alone once more. But something inside him was no longer the same. He had crossed an invisible line without meaning to. And now, every order from the Zereth felt heavier. The cracks in his armor had begun to spread. The truth about the Worth warship Zereth floated above the ruined city like a silent predator. Its engines rumbled softly, a constant reminder that the hunt was far from over. Vorik stood on one of the observation decks, staring down at the blackened streets below. His mind was a battlefield of its own. He had never disobeyed orders in his long career, but lately, he found himself hesitating, and that hesitation had a name: Arya. She had disappeared into the ruins after the last encounter. Any other prey would have been hunted down, but Vorik hadn't pursued her. Instead, he kept finding excuses to return to the surface. Tonight, those excuses brought him to a sector marked cleared by his soldiers, an area where no human should have survived. He found her in the basement of a collapsed building. She was leaning over a makeshift table, examining a cracked screen covered in alien script. Two other survivors stood nearby, their eyes wary as Vorik stepped into the dim light. The tension in the room was thick enough to taste. "You shouldn't be here," Arya said flatly, not looking up. "You shouldn't be alive," Vorik replied, his voice a low rumble. She smirked faintly. "Guess we both have a habit of breaking the rules." Vorik's gaze shifted to the screen. The alien text flickered and glowed faintly. "You can read that?" he asked. "Not all of it," she admitted, "but enough." Her fingers tapped a sequence. And the symbols shifted, forming a rough map of the galaxy. Vorik stepped closer. The red markers on the map were unmistakable targets, dozens of worlds marked for destruction, and at the center of the path, Earth. This is your war plan, isn't it? Arya said quietly. Your people don't kill because they have to. They kill because they're afraid. Vorik's jaw tightened. They fear nothing. He growled. She shook her head. They fear what they can't control. Your kind has seen what humans are capable of. They know we can grow, adapt, fight back, and maybe even win. So they destroy us before we have the chance. Her words struck something deep inside him. He had been taught since birth that his species was superior, unchallenged in the galaxy. But if what she said was true, then their endless war wasn't strength. It was insecurity. It was fear. And fear was weakness. You think I'm lying, Arya said, reading his silence. Fine. I can prove it. She opened a second file. The screen showed recordings, alien council meetings, high-ranking commanders. Speaking in his own language, he understood every word. They spoke of Earth as a potential rival. They spoke of humanity's unpredictable growth as a threat. And worst of all, they spoke of using the invasion to send a message to other worlds. No one could rise without Zrathian permission. Vorik's claws curled against the table. This was not the war he believed in. This was slaughter dressed as strategy. Arya's eyes met his. You can keep following orders, or you can help us. But if you keep fighting for them, you're not a warrior. You're just their weapon. Her voice was calm, but it hit harder than any blade. Vorik turned away, his mind burning. On the Zereth, the war orders were clear. Earth was to be erased within the week. But now, he could no longer see that command as honorable. He could only see it as cowardice. For the first time, Vorik felt the weight of choice pressing on his shoulders. And he knew that whichever path he chose, it would change everything. Asterisk choosing a Sith warship Zereth loomed over the dead city like a storm that would never pass. Inside its command chamber, the air was heavy with tension. Rows of Zrathian soldiers stood silent, their armor glinting. Under the cold light, at the center of the room, Vorik knelt before High Commander Sorik, the most feared leader in their fleet. Sorik's voice was sharp and deep. Your reports have been incomplete, Vorik, he said, his amber eyes narrowing. You hunt slower than before. You spare survivors. And most disturbing, there are rumors of a human woman. Vorik's jaw tightened. He did not answer. He had faced warlords, assassins, and death itself without fear. But in this moment, he knew one wrong word could mean the end, not just for him, but for Arya. Sorik stood from his throne-like chair, stepping down with heavy, deliberate strides. You will prove your loyalty to the Empire, he said. You will find this human, and you will kill her. You will do it here, in front of your soldiers, so they see that Vorik is still the warrior we believe him to be. The chamber was silent except for the low hum of the ship's core. Vorik's mind burned. Killing her would prove his loyalty. Refusing would mark him as a traitor. A sentence that meant death. Later that night, the order was set in motion. The soldiers tracked Arya's movements through the ruins. It did not take long before she was surrounded, for skiffs landed in the center of the shattered plaza. Their engines whining, Vorik stepped out of the lead craft. His weapon in hand, Arya stood at the far side. Dust clung to her hair, and her face was streaked with ash, but her eyes, steady, sharp, locked on his. She glanced briefly at the soldiers around her, then back to him. So, she said quietly, this is how it ends. The soldiers stood ready, waiting for their commander's strike. Vorik walked toward her slowly. His armor clinked softly with each step. Inside, his mind was chaos. Every part of his training screamed to obey, to finish this quickly. But The memory of her words, her defiance, and the truth she had shown him burned hotter than any order. He stopped just a few steps away. His claws tightened around the spear. Arya didn't move. "You could have killed me 100 times, she said. "Why haven't you?" For a heartbeat, there was no sound. Then Vorik turned sharply, but not toward her. With one swift motion, he brought his spear down on the soldier to his right, the blade slicing through the alien's chest plate. The plaza erupted into chaos. "Protect the human," Vorik roared. Half the soldiers froze in shock. The others opened fire. Vorik moved like a storm, his spear deflecting blasts and cutting through armor. Arya dove behind a chunk of broken wall as energy bolts scorched the air around her. "Vorik, you defy the Empire," one soldier shouted. His answer was a sharp, brutal strike that sent the soldier crashing to the ground. More skiffs descended overhead. Reinforcements. Vorik grabbed Arya's arm and pulled her toward the nearest alley. "We're not safe here," he growled. They ran through the ruins, the sound of alien engines roaring behind them. Vorik knew the moment he turned his weapon on his own people, there was no going back. The Empire would hunt him now as they hunted her, and yet, the strange weight that had been in his chest for days, it was gone, replaced by something sharper, a purpose. When they reached the edge of the city, Arya stopped, breathless. "You just made yourself an enemy of your own kind," she said. Vorik's amber eyes met hers. "I made myself an enemy of their lies," he replied. "From this moment, I fight for Earth." The monster who defended humanity dawn over the ruined city was painted in fire. Above, the warship Zereth drifted low, its vast shadow swallowing entire districts from its belly. Smaller attack craft poured out like a swarm of dark insects, their engines screaming through the morning sky. They weren't hunting survivors anymore. They were hunting Vorik, on the outskirts, in the skeleton of an old industrial yard. Vorik stood ready. His armor was dented, scorched, and splattered with the black blood of his own kind. Beside him, Arya crouched behind a collapsed metal wall, checking the magazine of a human rifle she had scavenged. It wouldn't do much against those Rathian war machines, but she was determined to fight anyway. "You don't have to stay," Vorik said, his deep voice rumbling. She glanced up at him. "Neither do you," she answered. A flicker of something passed between them. Not trust exactly, but something close. The first wave hit hard. Gunships screamed overhead, firing bolts of green plasma that scorched the ground. Vorik moved like a living weapon, his spear spinning, slicing through armor and shields. Every strike was precise, every movement fueled by something more than instinct. This wasn't the cold, methodical killing of a hunter. This was defense, fierce and relentless. Arya fired from cover, her shots picking off soldiers who tried to flank them. At one point, a blast collapsed her shelter. Vorik was there instantly, pulling her clear and taking the hit himself. The plasma burned through part of his shoulder plate, black smoke rising from the wound. He didn't slow down. Overhead, the Zereth shifted position. Its main cannon began to power up, a weapon that could level half the city in one shot. Vorik's eyes narrowed. "That's their command signal," he growled. "If I destroy that cannon, the fleet will lose coordination. How do you plan to do that?" Arya asked. He looked at her. "You won't like it." Before she could protest, he activated a beacon on his armor. The alien fleet instantly locked onto his position. "Stay alive," he told her. Then he charged out into the open, drawing the fire of every gunship in range. It was chaos, explosions ripping apart the ground, walls collapsing under the barrage. Vorik leapt from wreckage to wreckage, closing the distance to the nearest enemy skiff. With a brutal swing of his spear, he tore through its hull, sending it crashing into another. The path to the Zereth was opening. But his armor was taking hit after hit. Arya, refusing to stay behind, ran after him, firing at anything that tried to cut him off. When he reached the base of the Zereth, he leapt onto a cargo lift as it rose toward the belly of the warship. Soldiers swarmed him. He fought like a storm given shape, each movement deliberate, unstoppable. Finally, he reached the cannon chamber. The massive weapon hummed, charging for its shot. Sorak, the High Commander, stood at its controls. His voice was venom. You were our sharpest blade, Vorik, and now you are nothing but a broken tool. Vorik didn't answer. Instead, he drove his spear into the cannon's power core. The explosion was instant, a blinding flash, a shockwave that ripped through the chamber. The blast tore open side of the Zereth, flames spilling into the morning sky. The fleet faltered, its formation breaking without the command signal. Human resistance forces took the chance to strike back. Across the city, the tide began to turn. Vorik staggered, his armor cracked and burning. Arya appeared at his side, grabbing his arm to steady him. You did it, she said. He looked at her with eyes dimming but steady. You were the first human I saw, he said quietly, and the last thing worth saving. His knees gave way, and she lowered him to the ground as the sounds of battle echoed above. Vorik's breath slowed, but there was no fear in his gaze, only the strange, new peace of someone who had finally chosen his own war. In the days that followed, humans would tell the story of the alien monster who turned against his own kind to defend Earth. Some called it legend, others called it truth, but Arya knew the truth better than anyone. The monster had a heart. It had simply taken a human to find it.